Do you know what's stopping you from doing that one thing you've always wanted to do? You don't, because it doesn't exist. This is Josh Bauer, and no, it really doesn't exist. I am going to read a letter that I wrote and intend to send to every senator, House representative, governor, treasury secretary, and all those of every single state, and then of the federal government as well, and also the president. And I think this will be my new process. I mean, whenever I come across something that is just disgusting or ridiculous, I'm just going to start a mass mailing campaign, which is not inexpensive, nor is it, quick. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money. But this was something that really, really pissed me off. And not even just because of the inconvenience that it caused me, but just because it should be illegal. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into the letter. Dear Senator, I am a 21-year-old resident of Buffalo, New York, with a recent degree in business as well as plans to become a helicopter pilot. Firstly, thank you for taking the time to read my letter. It is written with a combination of concern, frustration, and hope for improvement. With the United States dollar being the official currency of the U.S., as well as one of the most influential currencies abroad, it may come as a surprise to you that the government agencies within our own borders have banned the use of its most basic form, cash. Since the invention of credit cards, online payment methods like PayPal and Venmo, and bank-linked debit cards, Americans have experienced the great benefit of paying for things more quickly and conveniently. That benefit, while overwhelmingly positive, has unfortunately been misconstrued by institutions within our government as an excuse to transition to a cashless economy, in which all value is transferred, monitored, controlled, and potentially even owned by federal and local governments, as well as the banking system, which receives federal support under the FDIC and is therefore subject to the risk of government interference. There are two things fundamentally necessary to preserve the freedom of this country that have made it great since its founding: the free flow of information, and the free and unrestricted flow of value in exchange for products and services. While both are constantly under attack, recent developments like Elon Musk's purchase and neutralization of Twitter have greatly reinforced the first. The second, however, would be significantly compromised by the elimination of cash and the establishment of a system in which the government and its proxies have the power to monitor and restrict the flow of money. With recent allegations from those such as Mark Anderson that the government uses its influence over the banking system to deplatform both political opponents of the current administration as well as business competitors of the banks, such as cryptocurrency startups, the critical importance of preserving cash as a legal, alternative, and unconditionally accepted form of payment becomes even more clear. A legal United States citizen with no criminal record could find themselves in a situation where they are unable to purchase basic living necessities like food if they speak of a topic in a way that the government disagrees with and are resultingly debanked, and there is no option to pay with cash. I'm sure you now realize how this issue bleeds over into protecting free speech as well, and why the issue has sparked concern even from President Donald Trump, as shown in his remarks to the Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan during his speech at the World Economic Forum in January. You may be wondering which agencies are already infringing on Americans' ability to pay with cash. While there are likely many, the one which prompts me to write this letter is the Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority, which is a state-owned, tax-funded agency that owns and operates the Buffalo Niagara International Airport. This public airport has a campus-wide policy prohibiting all private vendors in the airport, such as stores, restaurants, coffee shops, and even airlines, from accepting cash payments from customers. As of February 15, 2025, the airport's official website reads, "Please note that the Buffalo Niagara International Airport is a cash-free facility. What incentivizes an airport employee like me to take issue with this policy? Aside from the broader issues already mentioned, I learned this policy the hard way, unexpectedly, soon after I started working as a ramp agent for Frontier Airlines, when I had to work a 10-hour shift without eating because I only had cash on me. Even a $4 muffin from Tim Hortons would have given me the energy needed to continue ensuring a safe flight for all the boarding passengers, yet that option of buying food was unavailable to me due to the airport's policy. There are multiple concerns about the systematic use of cash as a form of currency in the United States. Illegal counterfeiting that has a potential to take place, health concerns following the COVID-19 pandemic, security risks of transporting large amounts of cash, and the inconveniences incurred by employees who must count change during sales rather than merely standing and flipping around a kiosk are a few examples. While partially legitimate, these concerns are insignificant in the case of employee inconvenience compared to the freedom of commerce, irrelevant in the case of COVID-19, which is largely subsided, and even at its height was an airborne disease, and countered in the case of counterfeiting and fraud, where there is an equal and arguably more scalable threat with the alternative of hacking, corruption, and potential top-down governmental interference, such as that which has already been alleged. As a member of the U.S. Congress, how can you help to ensure an economy free from overt institutional control? Number 1. At the very least, I ask you to consider passing a federal law which prohibits any national, state, or local government agency or institution from refusing cash as a form of payment from customers in exchange for their product or service, or from prohibiting private businesses such as restaurants and airlines that lease their space from doing the same, notwithstanding any reasonable exceptions. Number 2. In addition, however, I also ask you to consider passing a federal law which prohibits any business within the United States that provides essential products or services, such as food, transportation, hotel rooms, and medicine, to consumers from refusing cash payments. According to federalreserve.gov, there is no federal statute mandating that a private business, a person, or an organization must accept currency or coins as payment for goods or services. Private businesses are free to develop their own policies on whether to accept cash unless there is a state law that says otherwise. While federal regulation of private companies should be done sparingly, I avidly believe that any business operating within the United States should be bound to accept the official currency of the United States. An example of a local law which already does this is NYC Code Section 20-840, Prohibition of Cashless Establishments, which states, "It shall be unlawful for a food store or retail establishment to refuse to accept payment in cash from customers," and "No food store or retail establishment shall charge a higher price for the same consumer commodity to a consumer who pays in cash than to a consumer who pays for such commodity through a cashless transaction." In addition, New York State Senate Bill 2023-S342 is an active, unpassed bill in the state of New York, sponsored by Democrat Andrew Gonardes, which would, quote, require that any retail mercantile establishment in which food is prepared, sold, or served, or other establishment offering goods and services shall accept U.S. currency, in parentheses cash, when offered as payment, prohibit such establishments from discriminating against cash buyers by requiring use of credit or debit cards for payment, except for transactions in which the buyer is not present in the establishment's physical place of business. I ask that this bill be brought at a national level, since the topic at hand is one of national currency. Thank you for your attention and for your continued efforts in preserving our free economy. Sincerely, Josh Bauer. I don't know if there's a whole lot I can add to this that hasn't already been clearly expressed in what I wrote in my letter. You know, it's one thing for a business to not accept cash. If we're talking a local business, even that I'm not fond of. Again, listen, I'm a little bit more conservative when it comes to not over-regulating businesses. It depends on the situation. And listen, I'm open to hearing arguments on different things, where you think certain businesses should be regulated. I'm open to hearing those arguments, but generally speaking, by default, I think, unless it's very, very important, I think the government should just stay out of it. That said, this is one of those exceptions to that, just because if you're going to run a business in the United States, it seems like it is just bare minimum basic common sense that you accept the currency of the United States. I don't know. This doesn't seem like too much to ask for me. It doesn't seem like rocket science, and it doesn't seem like it's even close to over-regulation. I think if you sell something in the United States, that to not accept the US dollar as legal tender for your services or product is fucking ridiculous. I don't know how that is even... I don't know how that's acceptable for a business, let alone for a government agency to top-down prevent any of its contractors and any of the vendors that have, that lease its space, as in the case that I'm talking about, from accepting cash. I don't see how it's got to be unconstitutional for a government to, I don't know. It just, to me, that seems ridiculous. The whole COVID thing was their excuse to start that policy at the Buffalo airport. And I don't know, I'm sure there are more airports that do this too, but COVID is an absolute ridiculous excuse to continue that policy. And now they're trying to say it's a bunch of different reasons. And I don't mean the airport saying it. I mean like all the employees that work for the restaurants inside the airport. They all have their suspicions. They're saying like it's because, and the airline employees, they're suspecting it's because people don't want to count. It's too inconvenient for the people that sit around and do nothing all day. Like, okay, there are people that make the pizza, and then there are people that just stand at the counter and watch you buy the pizza, because it's all self-serve, it's all self-checkout. Even when you buy the pizza, you don't even talk to a person. It's not even like at Burger King where they have those, kiosks now that you order it and then somebody brings you your Burger King meal and calls your name. It's not even like that. It's like you take the pizza out of the cage, out of the container, and you scan it and you pay for it and you walk away. There's not even an employee there. The employee's there, but you don't interact with them at all. So my point is, like, it's not like they're doing anything anyway. So the inconvenience of counting cash, and if you don't know how to do basic math, you don't know how to count change, then you really shouldn't be employed in the first place, is my opinion. That put together with the fact that, well, never mind on what I was going to say, but what's another thing? Another reason they say is security. Security is the dumbest excuse I have ever heard for an airport. Okay, you got to realize that all these restaurants are past TSA. There is more police presence and more cameras per square foot in this airport than probably anywhere else, besides, like, obviously government buildings and stuff like that. Like, obviously you walk into the Pentagon, there's going to be more cameras than there is in an airport, but airports are pretty high up there. Like, you need security clearance. If you're not a passenger, you need security clearance to be back there. I had to go through all kinds of stuff to get my employee badge to be back there. And there's cops everywhere. They're all armed. I mean, and there's TSA everywhere. TSA is not armed, but there's like 100 of them. So, like, there's an army of TSA agents. Like, there is not going to be... And everybody who has gone past there has already been screened for terrorist threats or whatever. And all the luggage has been screened. There are absolutely no weapons back there except the ones possessed by law enforcement. So the idea that there's any sort of security concern with the cash is... I don't understand how that makes any sense, considering it's literally the most secure place, probably within a 50-mile radius. I don't know, maybe that's an overstatement, because we got some downtown buildings in Buffalo. But, like, the airport's more secure than any motels or office buildings downtown. I know that. So unless there's maybe a courthouse or something, even that, dude, there's not as many cameras in a courthouse. There's not 50 TSA agents standing around a courthouse. So I don't think it's even an exaggeration. But whatever the case, what else do they say? There's COVID. There's the security concerns. There's a convenience factor. And it's just all... None of it makes any sense. And not only does it not make sense, but there are a lot of actual problems that I have already mentioned with this thing being let go and without it being challenged and, just letting it slide. And it's one of those things where if they can get away with it, I don't see how more people aren't getting away with it. I think they used, COVID as an excuse to implement it, and they just conveniently never withdrew it after COVID was done with. And I think I get it almost with COVID being, how you don't want people touching the same stuff and then going back and forth, but at the same time, that's not just something you can accidentally forget to revoke as a policy. Like, oh yeah, we forgot to make it so that people can, pay with currency again. Like, whoopsie, it doesn't work like that. Whatever the case, listen, I wrote a nice fancy letter and everything, and hopefully, I can convince I'll convince some people that actually do read that letter. I don't know how many people would actually read that letter out of, I'm going to send it to everyone, like state senators, federal senators. I'm going to send it to everyone. And I'm guessing, just statistically, some of them have to read it. And out of the ones that read it, I don't know, let's say 20%, I feel like is a reasonable number. Maybe that's even generous. I don't know. But I also put like a front page of TLDR, which was kind of funny. And well, let's see what it said. Let me look at it real quick. Yeah, very first page. TLDR, please mandate that all U.S. companies and all U.S. government agencies accept cash as a method of payment. And, they could just read that and not read my whole letter, and it would get the message across, because it is a pretty long letter. It's like 4 pages or some shit. But anyway, out of the people that do read my letter, some of them maybe I'm trying to convince, but my primary goal here is just to bring attention to this, because I feel like Buffalo isn't a huge city in the United States, and probably not a lot of senators or people like that actually go to it and experience this stuff. Not a lot of people in the government who are in a place to change this stuff probably know what's going on here. So I at least want to bring attention to everybody who could be... Okay, let's be honest about the fact that, okay, in terms of politics, this letter, I think, is appealing more to Republican side of the political spectrum and government. And I did that specifically. I cited Donald Trump's remarks to the Bank of America CEO, because here's what's going on. Here's what they claim was going on. What Donald Trump and others, Mark Anderson and others, claim was going on was the government would pressure banks to just blacklist people that the government didn't like. And they say it was for political reasons. I don't know if that's true or not. Those are just allegations. I find it easy to believe that the banks were definitely deplatforming people who were involved in cryptocurrency startups, probably as a breach of terms of service or some dumb shit like that, even though it had nothing to do with those customers' accounts with the bank. The fact that they were even involved with the thing just put them on a blacklist. And that's because the banks don't want competition. Obviously, cryptocurrency is an alternative method of storing your money, which if you're storing your money in cryptocurrency, you're not storing it in the bank, and that means the bank isn't able to loan it out and make a bunch of interest on it, which means they're losing out. So that's why they don't like the competition. And they'll blacklist you and try to make your life miserable if you're getting into cryptocurrency, and I don't find that hard to believe at all. And Donald Trump has mentioned that, and then of course my mentioning of Elon Musk with him being in the government. The letter overall kind of caters more to the Republican side of the political spectrum. However, I also mentioned that all the laws so far that have actually been passed that kind of mirror, just at a smaller level, what I am looking for on a federal level, all of those laws have been either introduced or passed by Democrats. So honestly, this seems like more of a bipartisan thing. This should be something that everyone wants, in my opinion. And Democrats probably like it because of the discrimination factor. Like if businesses are only accepting credit cards and not cash, it's going to be discriminatory to people lower incomes. I guess, that also corresponds to race. So, the Democrats have the whole inequality argument as to why all these payment methods should be set equal. And then for Republicans, it's like, yeah, well, we don't want a system in which cash is no longer accepted because then the government's regulating everything. So to me, it seems bipartisan. I think everybody should have a problem with this practice, and I can't, obviously people have a problem with it, or else these laws wouldn't be passed. Dude, this is the law in New York City, the largest country in the largest city in the United States, okay? So it's not just me going off on some tangent. If the largest city in the United States has a law that a business is not allowed to refuse cash as a method of payment, then that's not nothing, right? Now, some people might say, okay, New York City has lots of crazy laws. I don't know. That's up to you to have that opinion of what laws they have. And I don't know all their laws. I'm sure some of them are crazy. But, this isn't something that nobody cares about. If nobody cared about it, New York City wouldn't have a law, and there wouldn't have been Congress people in New York State, the whole state as a whole, that have attempted to pass the law. So people care about this stuff, and I don't think enough people in government realize that this is actually happening. So I don't really have much more to say on this than I've already said, but it's a problem for me. It personally annoyed me. Like, the number of times that I went hungry, even just for a couple hours or whatever, because I had split shifts sometimes, and I'd go home in between, get a break, whatever. And not only the amount of times it annoyed me, but the amount of times, I would eat at these restaurants a lot, because keep in mind, I worked at the airport like every day, not every day, like 5-6 days a week, and I would always hang out around these restaurants when I had a break. It wasn't just me being annoyed with this. I had the wonderful opportunity of overhearing all these other people, travelers, passengers, right, that are getting off one plane, getting onto another, or whatever, just about to leave. They just got off a plane, they're about to leave the airport, and everybody was pissed off at this. They're like, wait, you don't accept cash? Like, what are you talking about? You don't accept cash? It's money. Like, listen, again, it would even be one thing if it was just a business saying, hey, we don't want to deal with cash. Yeah, we get to determine what forms of payment we accept, blah, blah, blah. That wasn't even the case. It was the case that the airport, which is owned by New York State, is dictating that the businesses who lease the space within the airport are not allowed to accept the federal government's official form of currency, which is, again, I'll say over and over, as messed up as it can possibly get. Okay, enough with this episode. I have already sent this letter to probably 20 out of the 100 senators. Yeah, something like that. Maybe a couple more. I have a lot to do. And stamps are expensive. They're like, what, $60 a stamp? Well, I got it. 60 cents a stamp. If there was $60 a stamp, yeah, I would have been bankrupt by now. But we got a lot of money to spend on this still. And, again, when things piss me off at a personal level, that's when I decide that I'm really going to spend this much time and energy on something. And this actually is one of my priorities, which is kind of funny because it's a priority that doesn't really affect me all that much. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it won't have some downstream effect on me in the future, because it might if cash really goes away in the future. Who knows? For all we know, what I'm doing will actually make a huge impact on the country, but, that just depends on me bringing attention to something. And, listen, don't get me wrong. This is just, like, catching it at its beginning stages, because I know not a lot of places do this. Not a lot of government agencies do this, definitely. And if more people started doing this, then I think it would raise some more problems. So I'm not saying that without me this would just run away and go unchecked, because I think at some point it would get bad enough to where somebody else would start doing this, having the same problems that I have, to the extent that I have them with this policy. Whatever the case, I'm just really not a fan that I can go to Tim Hortons outside of the airport, the one across the street and can pay $5 for a donut. I mean, and get some $4 change because the donut's not that expensive. But then when I go to the Tim Hortons inside the airport, yeah, they don't take your cash. You got to pay with a debit card. It's ridiculous, and the fact that the government is pushing it down is even worse. And it pissed me off. And I went hungry one. And you know what? That's what this all is. It's because I went hungry the one day. I'm just telling you that right now. If I hadn't been that hungry with only cash, if I had a debit card, I still would have disliked the idea of the policy, but I would not have gotten as angry about it as I am now, and as I have gotten because of this, which has prompted me to do all this letter stuff. So, yeah, don't mess with a man's food. That's all I'm gonna say. Alrighty, see you guys later.